What's going on, guys? Zeus here. And in today's video, we're going to talk about transgender people. We're talking about Bruce Jenner a little bit. Bruce Jenner's kind of got the conversation going. However, I was requested to talk about this topic anyway. We'll talk about this topic eventually. So, let's talk about it. Transgendered people. I have a couple of thoughts on people who are transgendered. One thing is, I'm gonna lay this out on the table. I'm greatly confused by transgendered people, to put it very bluntly. They confuse the crap out of me. I don't understand. I don't understand what they mean when they say they feel like they are the wrong gender. Because on a technicality, the implications of feeling like you're in the wrong body implies there's a correct body. That you are acknowledging that you were not born correctly if you say that. And I've heard some people say, I was born in the incorrect body, the wrong body. Well, then that would imply that feeling like a man would then imply that there are traits and qualities that men do. Thus, the logical corollary is then that you have masculinity. If you feel like a woman, that means there are some traits that are primarily found in women, i.e. you have femininity. And if you feel that way, that means you were born that way, or you had to be socialized that way. And so with that being said, transgendered people cannot coexist with feminism. And that's one reason why it greatly confuses me, how you can be a feminist who supports transgendered people, and yet they fly in the face of everything you say about males and females. There's a user by the name of BASSFZz who really breaks this down in a very good video that he made. I will link his video in the description box below. Please go check out BASSFZZ's video, where he really focuses on the contradiction that is, transgenderism and feminism. They do work against each other, considering the fact that, feminists have told us that gender is a social construct, that gender is something you're taught. It's not really something you're born with. But that obviously can't work with transgendered people, because that would mean that the reply would be that it's not that you were born in the wrong body, you were socialized to be the wrong gender. You were socialized to be the opposite gender. And thus, if that be the case, then that would mean you could socialize the person to be different. And thus, all of those conversion camps would be exactly where transgender people need to go. Except we know that there's a gigantic backlash from the LGBT community when it comes to these conversion camps, or these therapists, or these Christian therapists, and all of that. So, if you're going to say that being transgendered is something that you're born with, then that would mean that there is a biological basis between male and female that must exist in order for you to say that you were born incorrectly. The implications that there is a correct form to be born in. And even if you say, there is no wrong or right way, fine, we will argue regardless of whether or not you say you were born in a different body, you're not comfortable in the body that you're in. Well, again, we can only work on one assumption. Either you were socialized that way, or you were born that way. And that you, being the outlier, there is something not correct there. Right? Now, I don't mean to say that to be a dick. I know a lot of transgender people are very sensitive, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But you have to understand that as a transgender person, if you have a transgender friend, they are the minority here. That is a rare condition. That's not something that happens to a lot of people, And the most interesting thing is this feeling. I feel like I'm a woman. I feel like I'm a man. That really confuses me, because I don't understand how you feel like a man, or how do you feel that way? Growing up, man, learning how to be a man, learning what masculinity is, was something I had to be taught, man. I had to learn that. I had to experience that, There were some things that I used to think were wrong with me that I found out that other men were like me, but it was never really a question of whether or not I was or was not like a male or a female, you know. And it's not really even that I was comfortable with myself, because I actually grew up to be a very self-loathing person for a long period of my life. So it's not even that, but it's just there was never even a question of whether or not I was a man or a woman. It never even came to my mind. So the question is, what is the mindset that some of these transgender people must have, you know, to feel that way, to feel, and again, it's a feeling, so it can't really be argued with, but I would love to know, what does it mean to feel like a man? Because I don't know what that's like, you know? Because the truth of the matter is, I could be a woman, and I would have never known. I mean, if it's all about feelings, I mean, there are lots of things that I do that other guys don't do, lots of things I feel that other men I've known don't feel. You know, maybe this whole time I was a woman and girls didn't like me because they sense that femininity in me. Maybe I am, I don't know. And that's the problem, you know. It's very confusing because I don't know what a woman feels like, you know. I also don't know what a man feels like. I know there are similarities I have with other men, but, I mean, I don't know, maybe I could be wrong. That's the confusing aspect there. I will acknowledge completely that I could be a woman and I never knew. How can you say that? Because if you say, you know, you feel like a woman because your desire is to dress like a woman, well then what does that say about tomboys? You know, what does that say about girls who have primary interests and, you know, dressing more like men? They still like men. Are you telling me that she's a man, but she's a gay man in a woman's body? Well, no, you wouldn't say that, because she doesn't really suffer from feeling that way. That's just more what she likes. So even if you are a man, you know, you feel more like you should be effeminate and do what women do and hang out with women and talk like women, I mean, of course that has nothing to do with your so-called sexuality. You know, I think a huge portion that, not a huge portion, but a part of that portion with Bruce Jenner's interview was him talking about how he was a woman and he was a heterosexual person, which is an insult to my intelligence, I think. You know, I watched an interview with Charlemagne. He's a radio host for the Breakfast Club, and he said the same thing. He was like, man, that was an insult to my intelligence that you're gonna tell me you're a woman but you're heterosexual and you like women. It doesn't work that way. You know, the logical corollary is you're a lesbian. It doesn't work. It can't. You know, the two ideas are contradiction in terms, so that's why they can't work. You know, so I guess going back on to what I was saying, I mean, it's strange to simply say that having a desire to do what the opposite sex does means that you are that opposite sex. I mean, how could you know? How could you know that's how women feel? I mean, how did you know that's how men feel? You know, but I do know for a fact that in terms of contradictions, like contradictions in language itself, you know, feminism cannot simultaneously say that you are born the incorrect gender and that gender is something that you're socialized to be, because then I could reply, then let us just socialize these transgendered people to be the correct gender, and you would say no, that's wrong, you should let them feel how they feel. And I mean, and again, we're working with feelings, you know, and feelings are very important, don't get me wrong, but feelings really don't have a basis on reality itself. I mean, it doesn't really matter how you feel about anything. It doesn't change objective reality. It doesn't change the way the world works. It doesn't matter how you feel about gravity. If I drop a pencil, it's going to fall. What was it, like 9 meters per second, I think it is. I could be completely wrong there. But it's a constant rate, you know, of the way gravity works. You know, and don't matter how I feel about gravity, it is. So, in terms of words and contradictions, it is true that they can change over time and they can change throughout the course of a society's existence, but you can't tell me that gender is a social construct and then tell me that these people are born that way. It doesn't hold any water. It doesn't make any sense to the logical mind. One thing I do want to kind of talk about, I noticed, man, a lot of people get firestorms whenever they say something that transgender people don't like, and I don't think that's really fair to anybody. You know, if someone wants to learn, there has to be a sense of humility that I think transgender people need to have, you know, and of course you can't force that, But if someone is trying to understand your disposition, yelling, screaming, and shouting at them ain't gonna help. Isn't gonna do much. Getting angry at them isn't gonna help them understand your plight anymore. And I understand that defensiveness, because you have to defend the way you feel all the time. You have to defend that you're a woman. You have to defend that you're a man in the wrong body. And I understand that. But again, if you're trying to persuade people to be on your side to help you out, to understand you, you have to at some point open up and be vulnerable and talk to people and help people understand. Because if you're always on the offensive and you're always attacking, no one, you're never going to gain any allies like that. And you have to understand that no matter how you feel, again, we're talking about reality, and in reality, you are a minority. I'm not gonna bullshit you here and say that that's a normal thing, because it's not by definition. So I mean, you can get as mad as you want. Excuse me. Don't get upset with me. Get upset with the reality of the world that you are a minority. It doesn't matter how angry you become at me for telling you the truth, but the truth is, not everyone feels that way. Not most people are confused. And so if you want people to understand you, you gotta talk to them. You gotta have some sense of humility there. You gotta understand that you're not in a disposition to say that I just so happen to be that way. When I'll give it 95%. I don't even know if 5% is even a correct statistic for transgendered people. But when 95% of the population doesn't even think about whether or not they're a man or a woman, in terms of being normal, that's just not true. And you're not going to normalize this idea of transgenderedness with TV shows and constantly talking about it, because the truth of the matter is, it's not normal. And I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm sorry. I'm not saying that you should be treated badly because you're not normal. I am not saying that you deserve any level of physical harm, because you don't. Let me say this again. I'm not saying you deserve to be mistreated or any level of harm because you're not normal. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying that is you have to be honest with yourself, and you gotta be honest with other people. Truth is, that's a contradiction in terms of gender and sociology. It's a contradiction upon itself. And if you're gonna help people understand you gotta have some humility. You can't fight all of the time. I understand the desire, not even a desire, but a sensitivity and a defensiveness, because a lot of people are dealing with a lot of feelings and emotion. But if you're gonna gain allies, you can't do that. If you want people to understand you gotta talk to them as equals. You gotta have some level of humility, and you gotta let them be able to say, nah, I don't agree with you. You gotta let them have that freedom. Otherwise, they're just gonna view you as an enemy, man. You can't play zero-sum games. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about, that whole transgender thing. It is a contradiction in terms. When it comes to gender, it really doesn't make a lot of actual sense. Should they be treated badly? Of course not. I shouldn't even have to say that. But so there is no confusion on record. People who say they're transgendered do not deserve any level of physical or emotional harm. Nobody deserves that, But in order to understand you have to talk to people, and there has to be some level of humility, because when it all comes down to it, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Sorry. So that being said, hopefully I left you guys with something to think about. By all means, man, correct me, talk to me, help me understand what does feeling like a man feels like. What does it mean to feel like a woman? Help me understand those concepts. And if not, if you're going to, scream, yell, and shout, go ahead and prove my point about a lack of humility. I just really hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Hopefully I make the person satisfied talking about this topic. Go check out BASSFZz's 2 cents video. It is a very good video, I think, and should be, a conversation should be talked about here to help people understand this concept. So, as always, if you liked the video, please go ahead and click the like button. Go ahead and click that subscribe button, comment on box below, and as always, have yourself a great day. I will see you cool cats soon. Adios.